Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of 22 Motivational Minutes with Marlo. And this episode is very unique. It's one of a kind. It's straight from the heart. And I reached out to Josh Booth, who is somebody I've known. I'm going to say 5 years, probably. I've known him professionally. I know him personally. You've done some work for me. In the terms of, you are a world-class business owner. You have your own company of Diamond Label Films. You are a wedding film master guru. I mean, that's how I see you. That's how your audience sees you. And like you said, when I asked, how can I best bring Josh forward today? It's just who you are. Like I said, this isn't the business so much as, I see you as a father. I see you as a husband. I see you as a friend. I see you, in business. And so like I said, it's such a ripple effect of how I know you. And my heart is just, this is my way of bringing your voice to people who maybe don't know or whatever. And I just want to have a real conversation. So, thank
Yeah,
you for giving me this opportunity, Josh.
absolutely. Thank you for opening your platform and your audience.
Yeah. So, let's just take it here. And like I said, when I reached out to you, I said, your voice needs to be heard. You are experiencing some things that, nobody's walking in your shoes. And I really
Mhm.
want you to take us into that space of like, what is it like to be Josh Booth today with all of the things that I
Yeah,
mentioned, as a human, as a father, all those things, business owner, take us there.
yeah. So, man, it this is an interesting time, Marlo, because white America has woke up, and when I say white America, I mean like my friends who would normally not advocate for Black Lives Matter or anything close to that. They are not racist. They're just not anti-racist. Um, And so for me, it's like, oh, wow, okay, yeah. So everyone is on board. Not everyone, but a large majority. And for me, it's like, but this happens every year, multiple times a year. I've lived like this my entire life. And you don't recognize it as a child until you start getting a little bit older. So for me, it's comforting, frustrating, and but also like overwhelming. And I've had conversations with probably three or four of my conservative friends this week, and two were back to back. And I just got off the phone with the second. First one was an hour long. The second was half hour. And I told my wife, I was like, I can't do this today. So just imagine the amount of conversations we need to have. It's hard to have them on social media. And so a lot of my white friends are reaching out, inboxing, probably get about 2 messages a day. What can I do? How can I help? I'm just like, I love it, but it's overwhelming. Uh, because a lot of what we go through isn't taught in schools. Um, for me, racism isn't being called a derogatory name, being looked at weird in a store. Like, yeah, those things happen. The racism that we encounter is when people, because I'm a huge like, sorry, I'm big on recognizing each of our own personal biases and stereotypes that we hold about other groups. I truly believe that the way to combat racism, actual racism, is to recognize those things we hold within us and talk about open, like have uncomfortable conversations. Then we'll start to realize like those preconceived ideas that we have about other groups of people, like they come from media or like what we have seen or have heard in movies or music or television. Um, and it isn't until you get to know someone of a different race, ethnic background, culture, whatever, that you start to realize, like, man, they're like me. We have our own troubles, you know.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, and so with that, racism becomes a problem when we take those preconceived ideas and then we outwardly express them and can have the potential to impact someone's life negatively. And so for me, it's like these people that we are seeing on social media that are making these weird comments, a lot of them are nobodies, but some of them are judges, you know, lawyers, law enforcement, uh, the H&R people who do hiring, you know, so loan officers. And that's where I think it matters, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so you bring up a really good point. It is important to have those uncomfortable conversations, Josh. How do we start them? Like, give us, because it's like this awkward silence. Let's be honest. How do we engage that? Like, from your vantage point, like, what do you see as the best possible way to say, hey, like, raise our hand, what, I'm ignorant, I don't even know how
Mhm.
to proceed, like, how do we do it? And what's the biggest, best, most uncomfortable conversation do you want us to be having?
Oh man, I feel like racism is such a complex topic. That's the reason why it gets buried. Um, I feel like we need to have the conversation of the history because from what I experience, a lot of my white friends are like, we need to take personal responsibility. That's what we hear often. And so, but then there's also like us needing to have the conversation of just, hey, this is what I struggle with internally. I'll raise my hand first and I'll say, this is what I struggle with. What do you struggle with? Start to bring those things to the light. And then we start to realize we're all alike in that fashion. Um, but the history, that's what I'm big on. We're not taught the history of black in America in school. It wasn't until I was late 20s until I started to figure out like little policies like redlining. And, just anyone can just Google that, that's, you can start it there and just learn. And then the more you read, you'll learn about another topic. And redlining is huge where like bankers were purposely not loaning to blacks, um, and keeping them out of certain neighborhoods. The reason why history is important to me is because often when I'm battling people online, they are saying, why is it that black people point the finger? Like why? And they don't understand that it's not a fair race in America. And if you look at 400 years of slavery, just that alone, blacks are not allowed to read, learn, write, that's 400 years of just being behind academically. And then we're like, okay, thrown out into the wilderness and say, okay, you're free now. We understand you don't have anything in America, so we are going to give you 40 acres and a field. That never
Wow.
happened. And then it's like another, what is it, 60, 70 years of oppression, like real oppression, like
Yeah.
actual, like racism and segregation and lynchings and Jim Crow laws, not being able to vote, just, and then you expect that to be corrected in like 2 generations, and
Right.
I always ask my white friends, like, your great grandparents were different than mine statistically. You probably know someone who had land handed down to them. I don't. And that's just like, and so we are at a disadvantage in America already, statistically. Um, and a lot of like what we struggle and deal with has direct ties to slavery. So when we
Right.
have the conversation of what reparations should look like, we always hear, but you weren't a slave. And it's like, no, I wasn't. But my diet is tied to slavery. Um, being, the slaves were given the worst of the worst food. And so that got handed down to our great grandparents, who handed it down to our grandparents, who handed it down to our parents. Our way of living, our way of thinking, everything is directly tied to
Right.
slavery. And so trying to correct that in a few generations is hard. And it produced the climate that we have now.
It is. I mean, it's that compound effect. And I mean, you just mentioned just a handful of things, Josh, but my God, there's so many. It's so deep. like you said.
Yeah.
And I think, that's where the tension is, and I do see the younger generations, I really do see them embracing this change, and they want it. A lot of
Yeah.
people want it. And like you said, though, it's not like you just flip a switch and
Mm.
you get everybody on board.
Yeah.
And so from your, because everybody knows I'm always solution searching, right? I don't
Hmm.
really see
Me too.
negative in my world, and that's, yeah, and that's why I love you, because I just I'm always out to see the positive, to see the silver lining, to see the possibility. And so that's always the lens in which I look through.
Hmm.
So how what if you could have a solution, right? If you had the power to have the biggest change, and you would be the one to make the change, what would you do? Like, what do you recommend? Like, where's
I
that,
thought about that.
let's go there for a minute. Like,
Yeah. I think on just a basic level. So a little like a while ago, I would have said befriend someone black, but that's not enough because of, like social media allows us to do that and not really step into the world. A lot of my white friends who get me, they have actual friends, and what I mean, like, they have conversations, they meet up, they and I mean, like, have dinner, and not in a restaurant. Have dinner in their space. A lot of my conservative white friends are afraid. They're scared, like, to walk into this space where, like, they are uncomfortable. But we need to have that uncomfortableness. Like, I'm uncomfortable every time I step into a room full of
right.
people who don't look like me, and I have no idea why. And I don't know if that's because of history in America and because what I see on TV, but if I have it, I'm sure everyone else does too.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I can remember as a child just having so we were a part of the Kingdom Hall, Jehovah Witnesses, and I remember this white lady taking us in and befriending us, and so we lived in what was considered not the best area of my town where I grew up, and she took us in, my mom and six of us kids, and fed us dinner and watched movies with us. And I remember thinking back then as a kid, I probably had to been about, I don't know, 11 or 12, something like that. I was old enough to be aware that, like, people don't do this. And, like, why is this lady showing that special attention? I
Mm,
get it now that I'm older. But I remember that more than anything from that time period. I remember the food she cooked us. She cooked us steamed vegetables, and that's something that I don't think I've ever had. Uh, you know, it was amazing, and uh, I would love to know what she's doing now, but that's something that I always think about. And so for me, if I had one solution, it would be to embrace a person of color, their family, go into their setting or invite them into yours and just talk. And you just never know what you will learn, you know.
right. So I'm hearing you say, just, be you. Just look
Yeah.
through an open door, no barrier, no obstacle, just embrace. Just like, let's
Offline.
just, yeah, yeah, yes,
Yeah. That's
right?
huge part of it.
Yes,
The offline is huge. Uh,
yes.
there was a quote that I read in sociology a few years back, the sociology class I was taking at Kirkwood. And this guy said that to combat racism, we have to work right directly next to someone that is not like us. And I didn't understand it at first. And then I ended up having this job about a year later where I worked next to this 19-year-old white kid who ended up was racist. He wasn't like blatantly racist, but he used to say these little jokes to me about Mexicans or about blacks. And then he befriended me online, and I saw that none of his friends were black, and the things that he would say was borderline like prejudice, racist. And so, through several conversations with this kid, I learned where his anger came from, and he got to see me as a human. And one of the things that he said to me was, "You're not like them." And it was super offensive, but I understood because he did not have that network or the surrounding of people of color or people who look different than him. And it's such a sad story because I ended up saving this kid's life. I saw him passed out a few years ago on July the 4th, and he was suffering from like a heat stroke or something. Any um he was laying in the middle of the grass, and they said any little bit longer, like he would have been dead. And so many people passed by and watched this kid lay there, but it was the black guy that saved him. And so uh, that was huge for me. And but then he ended up taking his own life years later. So it turned out
Wow.
to not be such a happy ending. But that always plays in my mind. So if we can get next to people that don't look like us, that don't share the same background.
But even you, like even just relating that story and listening to, you just dropped everything. Like, this was somebody who offered you conflict in life, right?
Yeah.
And didn't really run next to you like you would have loved them to. And yet you turned around and saw them in a situation where they needed help and you
Hmm.
stepped in. So it's just
Yeah.
like, so you drop that barrier. You just said, this is a person. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter who they are, what they do. I just want to help. And I think that's, yeah. How can we help? Like, I mean, I know we're having this conversation, and I guess what I'm trying to do is just find answers. I don't know if there are answers truly, but if somebody's listening to this episode and they're hearing us in synergy, just bringing it, what is there a difficult conversation that you want us to have? Is there, just take us into that biggest pain point for you right now?
Yeah. Marlo, the hardest part, and being that I am a storyteller, videographer, I know how to touch people emotionally. And the hard part is that people care, but they don't care enough. They don't care enough to do
Mm,
the research because what they think a lot of white people in America think racism is saying derogatory terms. They think saying white privilege is offensive. And I would love let me just tackle that for a second because that's something I've been running across with my conservative friends or people who are like kind of middle middle America. They say I'm automatically turned off by the term white privilege. And I said, you know what? I had to put myself in your shoes, and I would be too. I heard black privilege, but it's something that we all have to like research and see what we mean when we say white privilege or black privilege. We all have privilege in this country. At some point in our lives, we are privileged than more than someone else. I noticed when my male privilege is at play. I noticed when my black privilege is at play. If I walk into a room full of white people, I will get special attention because I am black, and there will be people who will go overboard to prove that they're not biased in any way and that they should show me attention. That is my black privilege at hand. And so when we look at the numbers in America, when we look at the disparities, yeah, some of it is personal responsibility, but then a lot of it is the upper hand and the head start on this race that whites have had in America. And that's not saying that every white American will have this privilege like instantly, like, oh my God, I, grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth. No, that that's not what we're saying. We're saying that in Iowa, you're 7.5 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana if you're black, even though the
right.
numbers show that we use it equally as our white counterparts. Just little things like that all across the board, whether it's educationally, um, black is just viewed different. It really is. And I asked my white friends, would you like to be black?
Yeah. Yeah. No, seriously. I mean that really, I mean, that makes good sense. And see, and that's the thing. That's where my tension comes from because I never see it like that. And I can't even fathom. It just frustrates me as a human that people are treated so differently or so poorly.
Yeah,
That just vibrates like with such tension for me because I
yeah,
people are people,
yeah,
and good Lord.
exactly.
Okay, so here we go. Let's talk about this. Like people are rioting, right? And we even
Hmm.
experienced last night. It was going on in our own community here. Yes, we're in the
Yeah.
Midwest. Yes, we're fortunate. This podcast, is a nationwide podcast, so people are listening from all over. But talk to us about that and like what you
Yeah.
see in that space, and give us some insight.
So I would say to your listeners and to anyone's listening, there are so many black people against the rioting and the looting, but you won't see that. You don't see that on TV. And it's just made to look like those people out there are the representative of Black Lives Matter and they're causing destruction. Those same people who can say that and paint us with like this broad stroke will in the same breath say that not all police are bad. It's just a few bad apples, which I agree.
Yeah.
But can we have that same luxury? Can we have that same thought? Like, not everyone in Black Lives Matter is bad. It's just a few bad apples, and that is the truth. Like, a lot of Black people are like, no, you are destroying our communities. Um, it's the young people that are out there being really riled up, and it's a good mix of crowd, Black, white, Hispanic. And Marlo, I'm conflicted because I hate violence, I hate destruction.
Yeah.
The truth is that white America is waking up, the rest of America is waking up because of that.
Right. Yeah. It
And
takes that much to get the attention, unfortunately.
yeah. And that's what one of my conservative friends said. He was like, man, I just had to say to myself, like, how bad does it have to be that your last resort is to resort to violence and rioting and looting to get your point across? He was like, man, it have to be really bad. And that's what woke me up.
Right. And the
And I was
sad
like,
part,
well,
yeah, history repeats itself here too. And that's just
yeah,
maddening.
yeah,
Like, why can't this ever get corrected? I think that's where I get frustrated. It's like, my goodness, how long do we have to keep at this? You know, how can we get this problem solved so it doesn't have to be a repeat? Okay, I lost you. You froze. They'll edit this. That's
of the
okay.
white baby. And
Okay, say that again,
so
Josh, because you kind of
I don't
froze
know
for
where
a
that
minute.
comes from, but you take 500 years of that.
Okay, we're losing our connection for just a minute. We're going to edit this out. But your screen is froze.
It's froze. Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
I see you moving.
Okay. So,
Let
yeah,
me
so
let me turn my Wi-Fi off.
then they'll edit it. It's not a big problem. Okay, it's still froze. So just give it a minute.
Okay.
There we go. I got you. Okay, perfect.
You're frozen on my end, but well, no. There you go. You're moving now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. So we can just keep the audio going. Michelle,
Okay.
yeah, she's my editor. She'll fix it up.
Cool.
So let's take it there. So, we were in the conversation of the writing,
Mhm.
and just saying, how come history has to just continue to repeat itself like this? That's the maddening part. Like, let's just, good Lord, let's fix this thing, let's not have to
Yeah.
continue. So we have what, 20 years from now, we're starting the repeat cycle. That's just, to
Yeah.
me, that's, I think, frustrating. And I think that's probably exhausting for you too, don't you? I mean,
Yeah, blacks in America, we've just learned to live with it. I don't think
I
it'll be
know.
corrected in my lifetime. I don't think it'll correct it in the next 30, 40, 50 years.
But that's
People,
that's got to feel just gross too.
I mean, honestly, Marlo, it used to feel way worse
Okay.
when I felt like the color of my skin was preventing, the advancement of my life. I used to feel I don't because I make a lot of my own rules because I am self-employed, and so I'm privileged in that right. And I feel for a lot of people that aren't, and they have to answer to someone, and they have to depend on someone to say, yes, you have the job, or if for some reason I don't like you today, I'm gonna let you go. So yeah, my wife and I, we're both self-employed for
That's,
on purpose for that reason, and
well,
so I don't feel as bad anymore. I don't
hmm
feel like I don't feel like I have to.
well, I think
So
what you've done is you've put a sense of control in there, Josh, that,
yeah,
so, and I think, you've stepped up, and that's not an easy thing to do. I don't care
yeah,
who you are. And, but that sense of control is empowering you. And I'm just grateful that you have that, because I love
Yeah.
that sense of freedom. I too have been an entrepreneur, an independent person, and
Mhm.
I thrive in that arena. Not everybody does, but I'm grateful to
Yeah.
hear that that is such a great space for you. Okay, so let's have the conversation. Your father, right? You're
Yeah.
raising kids in this space. Let's go there for a minute. Like, how was
Uh,
that conversation? And just the fear in your heart as a father and your
yeah.
wife. Take us
Oh
into there.
man, my son is almost 16, and I wish that I would have taught him about what he needs to know. Right now, he is that popular black kid. He is a sports star, and all of his mostly like majority of his friends are white. So he does not see racism as an issue, which is tough. But his last year, he's been like, "Dad, some things happened that made me uncomfortable. My friends said this about black people," and so it's like now he see what's going on, and he's like, "Man, we're living in a chapter, a chapter in a history book for the future." I'm like, "Yeah, you are." So I was like, I've had to explain to him like why people are upset. Um, I used to be the guy that if I got pulled over, and I know I got pulled over because I was black, I would raise hell. And this is when he was probably like 4 or 5. And I wouldn't like get angry, but I would always like give the officers a hard time. And now I realize, man, how foolish was that? like, do you know, like, people do not survive because of that. And
Right.
so, like, now I'm big on teaching him to just like how to survive in situations, um, even in situations when you like encounter other people. It's so that's what Black America is like. It's just being aware and like how to survive
Yeah.
because you can lose your life in so many ways. I was just having this conversation about the young. I think the kid was 19 or 20. He got murdered in broad daylight at a gas station in Florida a few years ago because an older white guy pulled up. He didn't like his loud music, and he confronted them and told them to turn their music down. And that was no altercation. There was just words, and the guy went to his car, got his gun, and shot him, and said that he feared for his life because of that. And because of that, I don't like to go to Florida. Florida is a stand your ground state. I don't like to go to Texas because of the stories there. And so that incident has shaped the way that I live my life. When I pull up to a gas station or to a store, I turn my music down, even if it's not super loud. And so we have these situations that play out in front of us. And in America as being black, and you're like, okay, wait, there's another way to die. It's like 1,000 ways to die. So it's like if I see a construction site now, I'm not going to check the house out. you know?
Yeah, yeah, and but how sad. I mean, and just listening to you describe that though, Josh, I mean, exhausting.
Yeah,
Exhausting because you have to see it so differently. And it's sad too
yeah,
because we have two adult sons. I can't even fathom trying to tell them how to equip themselves and what to be thinking about just to go to the gas station.
yeah,
That is just
yeah,
everyday stuff. That's
yeah.
ridiculous.
I would. There's so many cases of police injustice. It's very rare for the police to murder someone, unjustly. It's very rare. Uh, we look at the statistics, but when you look at the things that go unnoticed, the unjust, like the police brutality, like that's what I'm more worried about than getting killed by the police. Like honestly, but we have these situations that come up year after year, multiple times a year, and people are like, well, if they wouldn't have done this, or if that wouldn't have happened, but they aren't paying attention to the cases like Sandra Bland, you know, young black female who was going from Chicago to Texas to get a job and like was pulled over by the police for some reason for a tail light. She was arrested and found dead in her cell the next day. And like no justice. And we haven't forgot about that. And so it's just these compound things like that has happened.
Hmm.
And I also understand that like more white Americans are killed by the police. I think I don't think we're dealing in a racist police state. I don't. I think we're dealing in a police state where they need proper training, and that yeah, we should be standing up for even the white civilians that are killed at the hands of the police. I don't know whether they're just or not. We don't see them,
Right.
For some reason, media talks about black and white because it sells, but we should all
Right.
be aware.
Right. And it's that fear factor. And I think people just the underlying, when somebody's different from us, whether they look different, act different, whatever, they're because they're not like us. I think we don't even like, it's just, I don't know if it's fear is the word. I don't know. It's just, it's crazy, but people just, they raise their guard and
Yeah,
it's, I don't know. I don't even know what to say to that.
yeah.
So, okay, so we're going to come to the close of this episode. You know, how, what do you, okay, here's the ending question. What do you want to see happen in the next 90 days, Josh?
Uh, the next 90 days, I would like to see a lot of the politicians stepping up and listening to the loud voice in America right now. I feel like Governor Reynolds did that by having the black voice being represented by the NAACP and a few other black leaders in Des Moines. I think it was Des Moines. But then they also need to go forth and keep their word about having consistent meetings. I've seen so many police officers and law enforcement step up and say what happened in Minnesota was wrong. Um, that hasn't happened in the past. Not at this number. You know, um, a lot of people in Black America feel like all cops are bad because the good ones don't stand up for what's right when something happens unjust.
Yeah. And
Uh,
yeah, it goes back to that fear thing because, like, they're probably
yeah,
afraid of their own fellow officers. And if they
yeah,
cut out a line, do something,
yeah,
that is not the mainstream, right there,
exactly.
once
And
again.
I also want to leave this with your listeners. I saw this meme that said, if Black Lives Matter bothered you, but Blue Lives Matter didn't, then it wasn't the lives that were important. It was the word black. Uh, that was powerful. I was like, man, you're right. All lives matter didn't exist until Black Lives Matter did. Blue Lives Matter did not exist until Black Lives Matter did. And it was just, those were direct rebuts to the Black Lives Matter. That was a group of people saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, all of us matter. And so now that has become super offensive to us because we're not saying all lives don't matter. We're saying, man, in this country, we feel like second class citizens. We don't feel worthy um, because of the statistics behind the disparity. We we just want to be heard. So in the next 90 days, I would like every one of us to befriend someone that's not like us. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean offline befriend and walk next to them. You'd be surprised what you'll learn.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my white friends who are standing up for this cause have these really interesting stories. Like, I didn't get it until my best friend who is black, or really good friend who is black, I went somewhere in public with them, or I did this with them, and I started to see how people treat them, and it's like, if people can treat you like that without knowing you, then just imagine those people who actually hold some power in this country, some
Right.
some power in the systems, like racism is a system. Being racist doesn't affect us so much as racism, the system, racism, just having
Right.
that power. And so, yeah, in the next 90 days, let's be someone that's not like us, walk next to them, have dinner with them, talk to them.
Yeah, and just understand. I mean, just yeah, and like you said, those unknown conversations, just let them happen, and because we don't
Yeah,
know, and it's within that space. I think that a lot of awareness will be created, and I think for me, anything like that's why I wanted to bring this conversation forward and create an awareness, because I think that is where there's a lot of power.
we
But
need we need action and hard path online.
right,
Easier when you can walk next to someone that you can like feel them, and you're in their space, and there's just something that happens with that personal connection that allows you to have empathy next time for the next person.
Right. Yeah. I just remember when you and I were working on that project and we were zooming around town, we were shooting some videos. You did some video editing for me and stuff. And I just had a blast with it. I mean, it was just like
Yeah,
just you and I just having our day, and I got to know you, and you and I were just chitty
yeah,
chatty, and that was just a really fun day for me. And
it was.
I just and that's why I want to reach out because I see you as a friend, and I see you online, and I just you matter, and I love you to pieces. I love your family. I just if there's anything to do that that we can support, I'm going to encourage other people that are listening to this, support somebody, because
Yeah,
I'm guessing, if we can just come together and just kind of love and support, and what does that even, and ask, how can I support you?
yeah,
Let's figure that out. So excellent. All right, my friend. Well, this is where we're going to close out. I'd love to keep the conversation going. So you know what? 90 days
absolutely.
from now, we probably bring this back around and see where we're at, see what change has been made and what conversations have been had. And I just wish the best for all in this space. And I think everybody has a little something that they can do to make a big impact, but we have to do it. Don't just sit silent. You know,
Yeah,
listen, act, do something that brings positive
yeah,
as
I
much as
agree.
possible. So, all
I
right, my
agree.
friend, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marlo.
You
Have a nice day.
betcha. Yep, you too.